are joined by the great Phil Steele. Phil Steele's College Football Magazine, an annual, right? It is the Bible of college football. I think it's safe to say that. Phil, thanks for your time. So I always, since all of the changes in technology, how much more of a challenge is it, even with all of your sources and references, etc., is it more of a challenge to produce the magazine now than ever before because of the changes in transfer portal, etc.?
Yeah, the transfer portal has definitely made it tougher. In fact, David, this year we went to the press and sent the magazine, the final page of the press on June 7th. We used to be able to go to the press in the middle of May. I mean, the spring practices were over. I got to talk to all the coaches. We knew the rosters. Boom, it's gone. This year, the portal closed on April 30th. And, we knew all the players that had entered the portal, but now where did they land? So we gave it the entire month of May and even the first week of June to find everybody and where they landed for each team. I had coaches texting me a couple days before the magazine went to the press saying, hey, we just signed this guy, we just signed that guy. And every time you get a new edition, you got to rewrite the write-up, you got to change the two deep, and a lot of changes. So it's made us go to the press later and made it a lot more hectic at press time.
One of the things that you do with every program is that you look at what they've done either recently, historically, etc. And it's so much. I mean, like if it's Oregon or if it's Troy or whoever it might be, it is loaded. Is it at times like? Do you also think, okay, we need to do this year? How do you find the space to get it all in? And it's also, by the way, very easy to follow and read.
Yeah, I think that the one thing that's made it easy to read is for longtime users of the magazine, you know exactly where to look. Who was the starting rusher last year? You could close your eyes and point to the spot on the page where it's at. Hey, I want to know a stat from, who's winning the series matchup. You know where to look. Hey, a score from 3 years ago. Once again, close your eyes. Who's the starting left tackle? You know the exact location. It's the same for all 134 teams. So we take like 134 media guides, cram it into one source, and put all the information in an easy spot. But, it's, the write-ups themselves, what we focus on is three things. First thing is, what kind of shape were they heading into last year? What happened last year? And what kind of shape are they heading into this year? Those are the three questions I want answered, and that's what we do with each of the position write-ups. I may give you a little bit of history in the forecast just because, last year's record is not what the team is necessarily. You have to look at how they've done prior. There was Pitt, for example, had 20 wins the 2 years prior to winning 3 games last year. You can't just look at them as a 3-win team. So there's a lot of different factors that go in, and I try to consolidate it down as much as we can, abbreviate as much as we can, use small type as much as we can, but we get all the information in there.
So how much has it been you watching, and just as an opinion, of the realignment since Texas OU, and of course realignment in Arkansas to the SEC many years ago, among others, Nebraska, Colorado, Missouri, A&M, they are all left, but there's been a slew of it, and it's exploded, and the college football passion of like, what's the next move? But your thoughts about Texas OU, the Pac-12 and Big Ten, the Pac-12 and the ACC, SMU in the ACC, and the Pac-12 and the Big 12?
Yeah, a lot of changes. And the first thing I want to say, David, is I'm remorse in the fact that there's no more Pac-12. And ironically, the Pac-12 had arguably its best season in the last 15 years last year. They had legitimate, title prospects and playoff caliber teams. And unfortunately, the Pac-12 has gone by the wayside. I don't like the fact that the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference, has 2 teams from the West Coast and 1 from Texas. I always liked regionality in college sports, but as you mentioned, the first year of the magazine, 1995, was also the last year of the Southwest Conference, and college football survived, and it'll continue to survive and thrive. I think some teams will benefit from the move. You take a look at like Oregon going into the Big Ten. I think they contend for the title right away. Some teams are going to struggle. UCLA faced an easy schedule last year, taking on a much tougher schedule this year. Texas and Oklahoma, I think, are both primed and ready to go to the SEC, but Oklahoma faces a killer schedule. They play the toughest schedule of any team in the SEC this year. Texas, on the other hand, plays one of the easier schedules, and that's why they're my pick to get to the conference title game. So it's going to be fascinating watching all these teams blend in.
Who among, obviously Utah with Coach Whittingham and what he's done, Colorado with Dion and what they're trying to do. Arizona was really good last year with the coaching change, but they do maintain Fafita at quarterback. Is it Utah, Arizona, Colorado, Arizona State that in order might be ready for the Big 12?
I think only two of them are really ready for the Big 12, and that's Utah and Arizona. Utah is my number one surprise team in the country. I think they have a season more like they did in 2021 and 2022 when they won the Pac-12 both years. Cam Rising is back at the quarterback spot. Remember last year, it was sort of nondescript in August when Brandon Rose, the backup quarterback, went down. But then when Rising didn't play, they're down to the third, fourth, and fifth string quarterback at times during the course of the year, and teams could stack the line on. They also, as I mentioned, played in the rugged Pac-12 last year, which in my mind was equal with the Big Ten and the SEC. And they also had to play most of the top teams on the road in Oregon State, USC, Washington, Arizona. This year they get most of the tough teams at home in Rice-Eccles, where they've only lost twice in the last 5 years. They get Cam Rising back. They also have their backup quarterback, Brandon Rose, back, Sam Hurd back, so they're better at quarterback, strong at the line of scrimmage. I think Utah is my pick to win the Big 12. And the other team that would contend is Arizona. And I think had Arizona not lost its head coach and lost a bunch of players to the portal, they may be the preseason favorite to win the Big 12. But I like the hire of Brent Brennan. I like the fact that Fafita and McMillan both stayed. They've got a veteran offensive line and a good defensive back seven. I think Arizona will contend this year as well. Colorado, Arizona State, I think both teams have losing seasons this year.
All right, so we know that Kansas State has high expectations. They allowed Howard to move to Ohio State because they love what they have with Avery Johnson. Obviously, with what Kansas has with Jalen Daniels, if he's healthy. Then you have Oklahoma State, the steady Eddie with Mike Gundy, among a few others. Your thoughts about the Big 12? It seemed like there's a bunch of teams that are like packed or stacked in the middle that one or two might make a run, but your thoughts about the Big 12?
Yeah, I think in the Big 12, you've got 10, 11 teams that have a legitimate shot contending to be in that Big 12 title game. You know, you touched on Kansas State, Avery Johnson taking over at QB. He would have won the starting job over Will Howard, and K-State's been playing quite well, and they've got a good schedule this year. Oklahoma State's number one on my experience chart, and this after last year being inexperienced at number 115. So a much more veteran team, 19 returning starters. They've got the running back, Ollie Gordon back, who won the Doak Walker Award last year, and a veteran defense. One team to really keep your eyes on, David, is Iowa State. Going over the team with Coach Campbell this year, a lot of the positions, in fact, almost every position, he said, you know, Phil, this is either the deepest, the most experienced, or the best that we've been at this position since I got here at Iowa State. I think it's much like 2021 when they had a lot of talent returning, but were picked number 7 in the preseason poll, so maybe those expectations were too high and weighted on them a little bit. Now they're under the radar where Matt Campbell does his best work, and he's got a heck of a team. I think they're a clear-cut threat. Arizona, as I mentioned, West Virginia with Neil Brown, they've got the run game. They've got a quarterback that can run in Garrett Green. They've got the running backs with White and Donaldson, one of the top offensive lines, and the defense played pretty good last year. TCU just 2 years ago was in the national title game, and Sonny Dykes took a step back last year, but now they've got 16 returning starters, including Hoover and Seals at quarterback. Watch out for them. Kansas, as you touched on, David, if Jalen Daniels stays healthy, they're a threat. UCF brought in a ton of transfers.
Absolutely.
And they've got KJ Jefferson, who Gus Malzahn compares to Cam Newton. So they're a threat. Texas Tech, Joey McGuire's doing a heck of a job there. He's got probably his most veteran and best team in his third year when coaches usually hit their stride. He's got Morton back at quarterback, Taj Brooks at running back, and even Baylor with Dave Aranda. I never discount Dave Aranda because, to me, he's one of the defensive minds in college football. He's taken over the defensive play calling this year, also shifting up the offense to more of the spread attack. Had a really good conversation with Coach Aranda, and I think Baylor's even a threat this year.
Well, and you even noticed this, recruiting of now, which of course is more for 2025. They have jumped head in. They have finally kind of gotten the NIL act together. They were more active in the transfer portal with DeQuan Finn coming in from Toledo to compete with Sawyer Robertson. And then there's also the addition even of Gary Patterson as an analyst. He's a defensive mind like Aranda. That's like you go into a room and talk defense with them, you come out of there like your head swirling. How much of an impact do you think an analyst like Patterson can have?
Oh, huge. I've been a big Gary Patterson fan forever. The job he did at TCU was remarkable. And, man, like you mentioned, those two defensive ends, like Fisher against Spassky, in the chess championship. You've got two of the elite the defensive minds out there coming up with a defense. And, the one thing Coach Aranda told me is that, in the past couple of years, they haven't really faced this pure spread offense in practice that much. And he feels that by facing it now on offense, which they've changed up this year with Spavital coming in, that's going to help the defense as well. So, and I like the talent. DeQuan Finn is a guy who's 6'2", 204 at the quarterback position. Love what he did at Toledo. And I think in this new offense, Richard Reese, a lot of folks, including myself at the end of the year, after Reese had those 2 touchdowns late in the year on the kick returns, are like, why are we not getting the ball in Richard Reese's hands? Coach Aranda told me that this offense will get the ball in his hands in more wide open spaces. He could be a major factor this year, so I'm pretty pumped about Baylor.
Well, when he did return those kicks against West Virginia in the last game, I put out on Twitter, so I'm glad you said that. I was like, it makes you wonder why he hasn't had more touches at the running back position. It was a weird. Last year was so bizarre just throughout. So SMU, we've had Rhett Lashley, we had Elijah Roberts, a heck of a defensive lineman for them. They're now a part of the ACC. They have been waiting their time. It was almost like they were in college football prison for a while with all the things that they went through. But your thoughts about what Lashley at SMU and entering the ACC, and I think they're not just entering to be happy, but they feel like they can make a dent inside that conference.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with that statement. In fact, a lot of folks throw out, hey, last year four teams entered the Big 12, and none of them really had great success. Only UCF made a bowl game, and they lost their bowl game and finished 6-7. So anytime you step up from the Group of 5 to the Power 4, you're going to struggle. But this SMU team is not one of those 4 teams. I felt Cincinnati, Houston, and BYU were all in rebuilding years last year. UCF was the only team that had a modicum of experience coming back, and they made a bowl game. With SMU, they're number 7 on my experience chart. They've got the quarterback in Preston Stone. They've got a backup in Kevin Jennings. Wasn't it interesting to see both of them at the ACC media days?
I thought so, too. Yeah.
Yeah, who takes 2 quarterbacks? But they did. And then you look at the running backs. They got Knighton, they got Johnson, they got Wheaton, and then they got Brashard Smith coming in from Miami of Florida. That's a loaded backfield. They've got dangerous receivers, a veteran offensive line. And last year, they didn't just win games. I mean, to go 11-3 is nice, but they won their games. Or their average score last year was 39-18. They won or were plus 21 points per game last year. Now, granted, they're taking on better competition. And granted, last year they played Oklahoma and lost. They played TCU and lost, and they played Boston College and lost. So they played 3 Power 4 teams and lost to them all last year. None were blowouts, and I think this SMU team is very talented. I think they're going to be an ACC contender in their first year.
How much pressure on Ryan Day with Chip Kelly and his offensive coordinator, who yesterday he said that he would trust him with his life, but we know with what Michigan's done, even with Harbaugh leaving, do you feel like maybe, even though there's some coaches on the so-called hot seat, is the pressure on Ryan Day to win this year?
Oh, absolutely. And now I have heard national championship or bust. I'm not buying that. I think if Ryan Day beats Michigan, gets to the playoff, wins a game or 2, he's good. But lose to Michigan, you better win the national title. If he loses to Michigan, he's got to win the national title or he'll be gone. There's no way an Ohio State coach can lose to Michigan 4 straight years. But look at the talent. And, he's got Michigan to thank for this year's squad. And I say that because they usually lose like 10 players to the NFL draft, right? Well, this year only 4 guys left for the NFL. A whole bunch that could have left. JT Tuimoloau at defensive line, Hamilton, Sawyer, a whole handful of guys could have left for the NFL, but they didn't want to leave without beating Michigan or without winning the Big Ten. So they came back, and then I love the transfers that he brought in, like Caleb Downs from Alabama.
Absolutely.
They bring in Quinshon Judkins from Mississippi, a running back, Seth McGlaughlin on the offensive line. So this is is really a team that is poised. I cannot see him slipping up against Michigan. I got him a double-digit favorite in that game. But if for some reason Ryan Day lost to Michigan this year, he would be on the hot seat.
So in the Big Ten, you brought up Oregon earlier. They're ready to compete right away for the Big Ten championship. We just mentioned Ohio State. Michigan, of course, in transition with Harbaugh gone, and they had such a great team, senior team. Where is Penn State? They always are around, but it's hard for James Franklin and the Nittany Lions to break through.
Yeah, and they've been stuck in that East Division behind Ohio State and Michigan, and every year they seem to lose to Ohio State and Michigan when those two are in the top 5 in the polls. And some of the games most of the games have actually been fairly close. Now, this year, there's no more East Division, and they avoid Michigan. They avoid Oregon. And they avoid Iowa. So the only real big boy they play is Ohio State, and they get them at home. I actually have Penn State favored in 11 of their games this year. They have a talented quarterback in Drew Allar, who had a 25-2 ratio last year. They've got talented running backs with Singleton and Allen. The offensive line looks good. The receiving core is the big question mark, but they've got some talent there. Defense is strong across the board, and the special teams are good. And like I said, with the schedule, I think this is a playoff team. I have number 5 coming into the season.
Well, I have to ask you about former Baylor and Temple coach and a great friend of the show in Matt Rule. Nebraska has been really not very good at all, and they lose close games all the time. He's now in year 2, which he's always been able to take a team to the next level and takes over teams that are so dysfunctional. Your thoughts about the Huskers with a freshman quarterback in Raiola?
Yeah, and can you believe the last time Nebraska was in a bowl game was 2016.
Yeah, it breaks my heart.
7 years.
Yeah, I'm a lifelong Huskers fan. It's breaking. I know it's been it's like they had a 38 or 40 year run of a bowl game, and now they can't get back to one.
Well, they're getting one this year. You don't have to worry about that, David. And I'll tell you one thing. In my magazine, I have a lot of metrics. And most of these metrics are 75 to 80% of the time this happens. Generally, teams that have that amount of close losses the next year have an improved record and don't have those close losses. Nebraska's been in that outlier category, that 15% of the time category, because it just continue to have close losses. But what we've learned is that Matt Rule in his second year takes those close losses and turns them into close wins, has had the increase in record by about 5 games per season. In fact, when I talked to Coach Rule this year, I said, hey, your team's average improved by about 5 games in the second season, so you're calling for 10 wins, right? And he said, those are your words, Phil, not mine. But when you look at Nebraska closer, they should really open up 6-0 this year, perhaps even 7-0. The schedule gets tougher later in the year. But wouldn't that be nice to wrap up a bowl in the first half of the season and then just be playing with house money in the second half of the year? They're my number 2 most improved team in the country. And the key is going to be not only were the close losses there, but how about the turnovers? Last year they were minus 17 in turnovers. Mm-hmm. And the first magazine I put out in 1995, I did an article, Turnovers Equals Turnaround. Once again, 80% of the time teams improve their record. Nebraska will make a bowl game this year, and I think they have it clinched by midseason.
All right, so there's a lot. Phil Steele, by the way. Phil Steele's a college football magazine, annually the Bible of college football that comes out every summer, and we got ours in the mail a few weeks ago. It's amazing, just crammed with information. It's also easy to manage and like you said, guide yourself through each team or each conference or each specific section. So we know there's drama in the ACC. We touched on SMU. You brought up, the Atlantic Coast Conference with Cal and Stanford involved. But Florida State, after what they had last year, and then, of course, disappointed they weren't invited. The injuries tore them up. Clemson with Dabo needing to get back to a certain level. Miami's trying to figure it out. Your thoughts about the ACC? Is it Clemson, Florida State, and everyone else, or is North Carolina? Is it North Carolina State? Is Miami? Are they a part of that mix too?
Yeah, I've got 3 teams tied for first in the ACC in my magazine. And by the way, people say, hey, you're picking ties. Well, guess what? There are 17 teams in the ACC, and there's only 9 possible outcomes. So you're going to have at least 8 ties in conference play, for crying out loud, if not more. Probably more, because you're not going to get an 0-9, 0-8 team, or most likely an 8-0 team. So yeah, a lot of ties. But anyway, I'll talk about those 3 in a minute. But I do want to say that the 2 teams that have the best schedule in the conference are North Carolina and North Carolina State. They avoid most of the big boys. In fact, the only big boy that NC State plays is Clemson. They don't play Miami, Virginia Tech, SMU, or Florida State.
Wow.
North Carolina plays a soft schedule. Virginia Tech plays a soft schedule. They're all players. But the 3 teams I went at the top, Clemson, Miami, and Florida State. Now, Florida State surprised me. They lost a lot of talent from last year, but when I went through the team with Coach Norvell, he said at the end, hey, this may just be his most talented team yet. So I think a lot depends on DJ Uiagalelei. But remember when Jordan Travis went to Florida State, he wasn't really a great passing quarterback. Mike Norvell developed him into one. If he can get that out of DJ Uiagalelei this year, this is a dangerous team with a lot of talent, and Norvell hit the transfer portal hard again. Miami of Florida, their offensive line, David, if you get to watch one of their games, they're massive. They average like 6'6", 330 pounds. They are huge. They've got Cam Ward at quarterback. Damian Martinez, they had a weakness at running back out of spring practice. Cristobal goes out and signs Damian Martinez from Oregon State. The defense is loaded with talent, and they've got the best schedule of the top 3. In fact, I've got them the highest rated of the 3 at number 10 in my poll. And then finally, Clemson. And, Dabo Sweeney's getting beat up a lot because he's not utilizing the portal, right? Well, he may have the best chemistry and the best culture of any team. He only lost 2-3 kids out of the 2 deep to the portal, so he doesn't have to do massive things to bring them in. He's got super recruits across the board. Cade Klubnik, the number 1 quarterback coming out of high school. Defensive line loaded with studs. Offensive line loaded. A lot of talent on hand. And last year, while they lost 4 games, in those 4 games, they had 94 first downs to 60 for their opponents. Florida State, for example, didn't lead a single second in regulation, needed a 70-yard fumble return for a touchdown just to tie it. And Clemson could easily have beaten a Florida State team that was unbeaten last year. I think all three of those teams are very dangerous in the ACC.
All right, Notre Dame, independent. Obviously, they play an ACC schedule and international schedule, too, with Marcus Freeman. Brian Kelly moved to LSU. Your thoughts about Notre Dame, the Irish, and Marcus Freeman?
I like the fact that they bring in Denbrook as the offensive coordinator this year and Riley Leonard at quarterback. I think that's going to give them a better offense. Defensively, they're loaded. Special teams are there. And this is really the lightest schedule I've seen Notre Dame play in quite some time. It's my number 57 rated schedule. Their toughest game of the year might be game 1 at Texas A&M in College Station. And if they win that one, they're going to be favored in all the rest of their games this year. They get Florida State at home. They do have to play USC on the road, but that's winnable. Very few tough games on the schedule for Notre Dame. I think they clearly make the playoff this year.
All right, Phil Steele with us. Just a couple more minutes. Let's go back to the SEC. Kalen DeBoer's first year at Alabama. Auburn's second year with Hugh Freeze back. Georgia, well, that says everything. LSU trying to figure out a way to do other than, not just score, but also play defense, but their defensive line seems to be vulnerable. What Lane Kiffin's done at Ole Miss, Missouri with Drinkwitz, and on and on. You mentioned the Aggies. How deep is the upper level of the SEC in your opinion?
Yeah, I would take it probably down to Texas A&M. You'd have to include Tennessee in there. You'd have to include Oklahoma in there, and take it down to Texas A&M at that point. I think those teams are all legitimate. I mean, A&M could very well surprise this year if they get the quarterback play. The thing that Mike Elko told me, he said that this might be the best defense that he has coached. Well, heck, just 3 years ago, A&M gave up 15.9 points per game, and he was the defensive coordinator. So if they can keep Connor Wegman healthy, he feels the offensive line is improved. Look out for them. But one team I want to hone in on here, David, is Alabama, because I know when Nick Saban stepped down and they lost a bunch of guys to the portal, I was skeptical. I said, well, maybe a 9-win season. Alabama's clearly going to take a step back. But Kalen DeBoer is 104-12 in his career as a head coach. And I went over the Washington team with him last year, player for player, and I went over the Alabama team with him this year, player for player. And my personal interpretation, he's got more talent at Alabama Alabama, then he had at Washington, and Washington he took to the national title game last year. So watch out for Alabama. Going to be better than a lot of folks expect.
Last question, and these teams are going to have a chance because of the extended or expanded college football playoff, but the group of five, Memphis, UTSA, Boise, what Coach Golish is doing, he's very confident with USF, Liberty, Tulane. Is there somebody that jumps out to you that will probably be the group of five representative? And I might have missed somebody, but not on purpose.
Yeah, I'm listening Boise as my pick to get there. I like the defense. I like the quarterback addition they got, bringing in the number 2 rated quarterback in the country out of high school from USC in Malachi Nelson. I think that was huge.
Yep.
I think Memphis is very talented, but here's the thing. Memphis is almost unbeatable in the Liberty Bowl. However, they're under 500 on the road, and they've got to play the next top three teams in the American Conference, all on the road. They play UTSA on the road. They play Tulane on the road and South Florida on the road. That's why I didn't pick Memphis to get there. So I went with Boise, but I think it's a lot of fun. I mean, the thing with this 12-team playoff and one of these group of five getting in, it's wide open. That Texas State UTSA game could be a playoff elimination game, and we've never talked like that in the past, have we, David?
No, we have not, and it's great. The 12 teams, it's going to be interesting. Everyone's already trying to grow that, and let's go through this first year and see how it works out. Phil, you're amazing. The 2024 Phil Steele College Football Preview Magazine is on bookshelves and ready for you. You can go online to buy it as well. Thank you so much, one, for sending me a magazine every summer, but also for the time talking and just digesting so much college football.
Yeah, and it's only available at Barnes & Noble or Books A Million this year, so don't waste your gas driving around for it, or philsteele.com. But, David, I always enjoy our conversations, my friend. Yeah. Great talking football with you.
You too. Phil Steele, the Bible of college football. This is 365 Sports. All right, thanks to Phil.